This is not the video I wanted to make. Little Nightmares has always been one of my favourite horror series, and with the third installment releasing, I was hoping to make a video praising the trilogy as one of the best I have ever played. But no. Sadly, Little Nightmares 3 released as a disappointment compared to the other games, and honestly it's a little bit heartbreaking. Especially considering that a lot of the foundations for a good game are right there. I'm not going to spend the entire video calling every element of the game bad, because at the end of the day, this is a team of people who have poured a lot of their time and effort into making it, and I don't feel quite right looking at it and just going, wah, game bad. Especially considering it's Supermassive's first take on a Little Nightmares game. However, I'd still like to take a look through at a lot of the different elements of Little Nightmares 3 and compare it to the two games that came before it to properly try and work out where Little Nightmares 3 fell short. Hiya, my name is Foxy, and welcome to the video. Let's start with the start of the game. It makes sense to start there, I guess. The menu shows us a giant looming manor, mimicking 2's menu that shows the city. This is pretty neat, as it tells us pretty quickly that we'll be seeing this location at some point in the game, and as we all know,
foreshadowing is a narrative device.
We have an opening shot of a mirror, again mimicking something that 2 did, with the long hallway. I must admit I do prefer 2's opening shot, but by no means is 3's bad. It's a good bit of context for Lo's ability to use the mirrors as a means of transport, which is something I'll cover in more detail in a later part of this video. Anyway, we're in a small room, which once we leave by throwing a shoe at this button, puts us in this vast desert mid-sandstorm. Continuing to push forward shows us this gigantic wall, and once we scale as high as we need to, we still can't see the top. Alone hits something with her wrench, and we're properly on our way. First thing, I love how this looks. The desert aesthetic is very cool and nicely sets it apart from the other two games. And then we lose this colour palette less than 40 minutes into the first chapter, and never get it back. The game ends up mostly being grey and a little too dark from this point forward. Ooh, combat time! Lo shoots with the bow, and Alone hits with the wrench. 4 times. Completely scripted, but that's the only time this happens in the game, right? Any future combat sections will absolutely be better, right? Right? We get some umbrella sections with these giant fans, and honestly I do very much enjoy this section. We get a brief return of the desert aesthetic, and some fun little movement tests. This is one of my favourite things about Little Nightmares as a whole. The sections that are scary not because of the enemies posing a threat, but because of the fact the environment around us is absolutely not designed for us to exist in. Using strong gusts of air to dive between these precarious wooden structures is very intimidating. We're introduced to our first enemy, and this baby thing attacks us with her Medusa powers, and we have to hide before she leaves us to progress. And after a second encounter very shortly after this, the baby picking up this rattle-like object, I think now is probably a good time to talk about something. At no point does this baby actually feel like that much of a threat. It feels like we are simply existing in the same place as her, and letting her do her thing and stay out of the way. Comparing this to the first enemies in 1 and 2, the janitor and the hunter respectively, this feels like just such a step backwards. In the first game, we have to stay as quiet as possible, while this blind man with freaky noodle arms tries to latch onto any bit of noise we make to find us. And in 2, we find ourselves being hunted by a maniac with a shotgun, who sets traps and tries everything he can to capture us. Here, we're just moving through set pieces. Once we're back from this cutscene with Lo, the grey aesthetic of the game truly sets in, and the desert aesthetic is completely gone. There's a cute little callback to Little Nightmares 2 here, with the birds flying off alerting the enemy, and a stealth section very reminiscent of this area from the first game. Alone hits something. We scale up the inside, then the outside of a building. Honestly, pretty cool, but Little Nightmares 1 did this better. Alone hits something. Lo shoots something. We hurt our ears with a giant bell and get the baby's attention, giving her a new stimmy toy. This did make me giggle quite a bit at first, and then we have an actually cool use for Alone's wrench, using it as a makeshift handle to turn this little rotary thingy to allow the fan to blow. Lo can go up and drop a ladder down for us to climb. There's another very cool umbrella moment here where we glide between two buildings and the baby walks on in the background. But since the baby still doesn't feel like a threat, it's a little less effective. We have a couple more interesting sequences, one player pushing a box that the other player is hanging off, and a couple other similar environments that look pretty damn nice. This second Dodge the Medusa baby section builds off the first by having Lo shoot something, and then we're in the final sequence of the chapter. I would call it a chase and a boss fight, but we're not running from the baby, we're just running from the building collapsing on us, which we've already had to do once this chapter. And as for the finale, I want to put this into perspective by taking it pace by pace compared to the Hunter sequence from Little Nightmares 2. A bird alerts the Hunter to Sixamono's location, and we have to hide behind a few small, fragile crates as we run from him. After avoiding a few shots, we lock ourselves inside a small cabin, but there's no way this small latch will hold. We pull one of his shotguns from the wall, steady it together, and blast him into oblivion. We leave the cabin through the window, and sit on a door together as we float across the ocean. Now for the finale of the baby. Alone and Lo go through a two-person door together, and then the baby bursts through the wall. But she's not actually attacking us. She's just grabbing random parts of the wall. I don't know if you can die to her, but it really doesn't feel like you can. We make a jump, then hide behind this rattle, then this random box. The baby gets swarmed by birds, and that's it. No real dramatic moment, no proper send-off, just walking into the distance while swatting at a swarm of birds. This was such an underwhelming moment that when I got the Peekaboo achievement for beating this chapter, I genuinely didn't know what the achievement was for. I didn't think that this would be the end of the baby, but no, we simply drop down to a mirror and Lo pulls us through. I'm just going to show a couple of clips from my first playthrough that I think perfectly showcase how underwhelming this really was. Peekaboo, there is a twinkle in that eye. I don't know what that achievement means, but peekaboo! There's no way we're done with that first enemy already, right? Gonna get on a bus in a minute? Oh, okay. You're probably gonna miss the final chase with whatever this baby guy is. This chapter was simply void of anything after the first 20 or so minutes. We started with this incredible desert and ominous city, but the enemy was a nothing burger, and the game becomes mostly grayscale about halfway through the chapter. As the third clip I just showed suggests, I genuinely didn't believe that that was going to be the final sequence of the chapter. But nope, birds I guess. Alright, on to the second chapter. Can I fit through these bars? Oh, I can. Alone hits something. We have a little bit of movement before making our way into what looks like a factory and getting a glimpse at our next enemy. I believe the official name for her is the Spider, but I'm gonna call her the Receptionist because she doesn't deserve that ominous title. First of all, she is just an obvious attempt to recreate the teacher from the second game. Now, I do very much appreciate her being introduced really early into the chapter, and the way she moves is pretty damn cool, with her having to push herself off of the furniture and the walls. It gives a pretty terrifying image in my head of her recklessly smashing into things to try and pursue us if she catches sight of us. Oh, never mind. She just magically gains the ability to accelerate on her own. That's a letdown. I also think it's a little bit of a shame that so much of her presence here is entirely scripted. We just have to wait for her to move to the next room to progress, rather than requiring any actual skill. It's just hide in a spot, sneak somewhere, then hide in a different spot. As if the receptionist spots you, there is zero way to escape her, which is unlike the previous games, where we could slide under cabinets to escape the chefs, or use a TV to distract the inhabitants of the city. The next area has this camera, and I was expecting some sort of puzzle where we have to switch the camera off in order for us to proceed, but no, we just move through a hole in the wall, and Lo shoots something. Next, continuing from the obvious teacher comparison, we have an area where we have to stealthily move through and then above the room the receptionist is in. Pretty blatant, if you ask me. To give the game some credit, this chase sequence is pretty cool. This is what I wanted to see from the receptionist. She's aggressively chasing after us, destroying the environment around here as she does. We suffer a massive drop, but honestly don't seem to get too hurt, thanks to Candy. This is the part where this chapter actually introduces us to what this area is. A giant candy factory. Unsure how that links to the arid city of Chapter 1, but nonetheless, it still looks very cool. We walk past some oversized workers and a lot of heavy-duty machines. Alone hits something. We drop down into a mountain of candy. Honestly, I'm very disappointed that there's not some mysterious monster looming under the candy piles ready to drag us down, similar to the shoe monster in the first game. A little disappointing, but that's kinda starting to become the norm for the game now. We push on, and soon we have a puzzle very reminiscent of the hospital in the second game. We need 2 fuses to open an elevator. I did actually get a little stuck here, as I found the first fuse pretty quickly, but struggled to bring it back, and also discovered that Lo's AI kinda sucks. I decided that running back through the bugs here would be a good idea, to speed up the game a little, and then discovered that Lo just lags behind and eventually gets swarmed, making us have to reset back to the side room with the fuse. While I don't intend to speedrun Little Nightmares 3, I feel like having this pretty awful AI when in single player could have the potential to kill people's runs. I'm pretty particular about the games I like to speedrun, and unfortunately having this much RNG with the companion's AI has just completely turned me off speedrunning the game. I don't know why that isn't something like what the LEGO games have had, where you can just swap characters, even if that would be through the pause menu instead of just the push of a button, but it just feels really odd to be stuck permanently as the one character. Also, while I'm thinking about it, it's been quite a while since we actually saw the receptionist. She was introduced really early on in this chapter, and has pretty much been nothing since those few rooms. Alone hits something. It took me embarrassingly long to get through this door in my first playthrough, as you're seeing now. I was assuming Lo would launch me up to grab the open drawer, but he just refused to. And then my second plan was to get both characters underneath the open drawer so the camera couldn't see us. Then I'd run and slide under the door before it had the chance to close. Literally 3 minutes later, and I discover that we can open the drawer on the bottom row to act as makeshift stairs. Oh hey, she's back! And now I can see why I believe she's called the Spider officially. She sheds her wheels and we progress. And now all we have to deal with is an insane woman with 6 arms. Prepare yourself for a chase sequence with her new form, and she does admittedly seem to be a lot more aggressive now. Although I think I would have preferred her to have kept the wheels in the dress, but still have gone full Spider, as watching her thrash around and violently throw her own body around would have truly emphasized how desperate she was to catch and kill us. I don't mind her losing the wheels, but I think there would have been a lot more fear if she kept them, at least for this chase. Again, the game seems to just fall short in the nightmare department, especially for being a game so notorious for these brutal and horrific looking monster designs. Lo shoots something. After a pretty simplistic yet fun puzzle where we fill a cart with candy to use as a platform, we grab a switch, we drop down to the final area for this boss. In my first playthrough, my game was actually bugged here for some reason, and I ended up not getting any music for this boss, which was off. It made the chase feel very anticlimactic and void of any real tension. I'm also just not impressed with the way we kill this boss. Her death being from a conveniently placed hydraulic press felt so lackluster, and felt like it was done just for the sake of having a big death scene for her. Considering we'd passed all of this machinery earlier in the candy factory, couldn't we have had our final chase be related to that? Imagine it being us running along one of these lollipop conveyors, dodging the press, then having it come down and crush our six-armed friend. That would have been a thematically relevant ending that tied her death back to the environment she was in. It's a little unfortunate that what we got was just a letdown. Anyway, it's time for everyone's favourite game console to take the stage as Alolan and Lone teleport to the next area. Chapter 3. What in my opinion is the single worst chapter in this or any game in the series. I'll be honest, it's nice to see Alolan and Low hug though. After the betrayal at the end of the second game, seeing these two be genuinely good friends is a very welcome change. Anyway, the gnome jumping puzzle. I got the first few just fine, but it genuinely feels like my game bugged on my first playthrough. I am very clearly jumping on the chair here, and it just didn't trigger the next stage of this sequence. Because of this, I got stuck here for a good while. Anyway, once this is solved, we can progress some more. Alolan hits something, Alolan hits something, and here's the fuse for this next sequence. This elevator up to the room with the flashlight feels like the proper start of this chapter, and likely where we should start to get to see the threat. But it's just void, aside from a creepy doll. The environment here does look wonderful though, if a bit dark. Alolan hits something, Low shoots something. Actually, Low shoots quite a lot of things here. This is not a puzzle, it just feels like such a waste. At least there's some good environmental storytelling afterwards, with the dolls that we just walked past breaking out of their cabinets and vanishing. We could be about to see a pretty cool threat here. Being swarmed by an army of haunted dolls would be neat. We have this little platforming challenge to do where we rotate the stairwell to build our route up, but due to the darkness, it can be a little difficult to tell the perspective. Once up, we have a lot of climbing to do, a room with an axe that isn't interactable, and a hidden room that we can open just by walking up and down the piano keys. Right now, though, I find myself wondering where any form of threat is, as this is absolutely the setting for the next chapter, but we've just had nothing so far. That does kind of change here, I guess, with the dolls whose head we smash, but even then there was no actual threat. I guess it's nice the game gives us a tutorial on the fact that we need to destroy the heads in order to kill the dolls, but was it really needed? I feel like most people's first instinct should one of these attack them while playing the game would be to smack it over the head with Alolan's wrench. After another moment of drama shortly after, where pulling a plank off a cart nearly makes it drop down on us, we get the silhouette of our next enemy. He sat in a tent listening to the radio, but pretty quickly shuts it and the ceiling light off once we reveal him. He gets his first attempt to scare us when we walk into the tall chair room. It's empty at first, but after we get the key in the room over, entering the room again shows us that dolls have been placed on the chairs. Ooh, doll combat! Let's go! This ought to be good. Oh, wait, it's exactly the same thing as the bug battle from chapter 1. 4 scripted spawns, where Low shoots something, and then Alolan hits something. Thrilling. The lightning in the background has more randomization than this damn fight. Near enough right after, we have another one of my big problems with the game as a whole. Let's take a look at a specific moment from Little Nightmares 2, when Mono has this train ride. Look at the way the world treats him. He is violently thrown around and slammed into parts of the train, and we get to see the effect of that. Mono ends up limping for a while and looks to be in genuine pain. Now, let's take a look at the zip wire in Little Nightmares 3. Alone and Low pick up speed as they advance, and then just come to a stop at the right point, allowing them to safely drop down. That's just dull, honestly. I would have much preferred to have watched them come crashing off the zip wire, tumble down the top of the tent, and splash into the apple bobbing barrel. It just really feels like this game is scared to show Alone and Low getting hurt, which feels like such a cop-out compared to what we've previously seen in the series. Another problem I have with this chapter comes from this very hallway here, where there's a bunch of sleeping dolls. This game seems to have an over-reliance on stealth. The only way to get through this section is by sneaking and moving slowly. One of my favourite things across the previous 2 games was moments where you'd unintentionally alert one of the enemies and then have to scurry as fast as you can to a hiding spot to lose them. That unfortunately just isn't a possibility in this game, as once an enemy spots you, they will catch you, regardless of anything. So this ends up just making most enemy encounters boil down to hide in spot X, wait for the enemy to do their thing and move on, sneak to the next room, repeat. I have nothing against stealth in video games. Sections like the library in the first game where you quietly sneak over the janitor work really well. But I also adore just having this Hail Mary option to full send it, smack everything off the shelves, and pray I don't get grabbed. That option just simply doesn't exist here, and it's a little disheartening. Oh, and Low shoots something to get a fuse. If nothing else, this chapter does at least have my favourite puzzle in the game. We'll ignore that it's inferior to most of the puzzles in the previous game. The chess, elevator, and shopping cart puzzles spring to mind. But here, one player just has to crank it to the right degree, and the other jumps onto the lamp and pulls it down. It's a neat idea, since with most of the cranks, it's been about fully winding them, but it's still just a step down from the previous game. Time to do a bit of a jump, as honestly, there is nothing interesting until we reach the point where the threat becomes a threat. Which, by the way, happens over an hour into the chapter. Looking at my VOD, I went through the mirror to warp to chapter 3 a little before the 2-hour mark. It took me an hour and 20 minutes to get to this point. Okay, sure, you can boil some of that down to me getting a little stuck on the gnome puzzle at the start, or taking a little bit too long to explore some areas. But I feel like when the environments are the strongest part of this game, most players are just going to explore them on a first playthrough. So this is still at least a full hour of this 4.5 hour long game where there is no main threat trying to pursue us. Just some dolls that are defeated by an arrow and a wrench.
Bon, go get him!
I don't think I'm gonna dwell on this chapter for too much longer, since it's just more of the same. Though I do like how demanding this little shit is about getting his meal. He's just a little goofy guy. The remainder of what we have left can mostly be boiled down to a few instances of the hand puppet chasing us, this weird cage puzzle where Alone can just walk out of her cage, but we have to sacrifice a gnome to free Low, despite the bars on his cage not really looking any thicker than ours, and one really cool 30-second moment where we lower ourselves down on a rope right behind the ringmaster to grab a key while he is distracted by this kid's poor attempt at juggling. And the very ending chase, which admittedly I do quite like. This shot of us running towards the camera while the ringmaster's silhouette slowly grows bigger and more visible behind us is very cool. Alone hits something, and then would you believe it, Low shoots something! We make a dash onto a hot air balloon, where the puppet climbs up to the weight bag to reach us, and the ringmaster grabs a shotgun and attempts to shoot us. This is easily the best send-off to any of the enemies in this game, with us torching the little guy and then floating away into the distance out of the ringmaster's reach. However, as cool as this is, it does allow me to segue nicely into another problem I have with the game. Transitions between chapters are practically non-existent. Aside from this hot air balloon, which is easily the best transition in this game, despite the cut to black making it still fall short of a lot of the first 2 games, chapter transitions in this game are done through mirrors, which leads to the areas feeling super disconnected. I think Low's mirror warp gimmick could have worked well if it was done similar to how Mono uses the TVs to warp in the second game, where they are an element of the chapter and often used as a puzzle solution or aid, rather than just being the tool to connect the chapters together. I think this could have also opened up the availability to some very cool two-player puzzles, where we separate the characters. Lo could warp through a mirror to get to a different area, and then both players would have to work together to build up Alone's path to the same place. With the third rant in one chapter of this game out of the way, I suppose we should see where our balloon crash landed. Oh hey look, it's the manor from the title screen. I can't say I didn't see this coming, but it's still going to be interesting to actually get to explore this place and see the relevance it has. We get a bit of exploring before meeting our first challenge, this weird plant thing with some sort of vine tongue that'll strangle us if we get too close to it. Would. No prizes for how we get past it though. Will Alone hit it, or will Lo shoot it? If you guessed that Lo will shoot something, you'd be correct. Oh, but don't worry, Alone gets to hit something right after. Hey, guess what? Alone shoots something. Another plant. These plants actually bring me on to another point I'd like to make. Little Nightmares 3 has no traps. Especially after the brilliance that is the first chapter of Little Nightmares 2, I was expecting to see more passive threats similar to the Hunter's bear traps and snares, as it built up tension before actually revealing the antagonist to us. We truly felt like we were somewhere where we didn't belong. Everything was out to get us. Not even the ground beneath our feet was safe. After passing through another of these two-person vents, we'll reach an actual threat, where we need to make a noise to distract it and lure it away from the door in order to have enough time to open it. I'll be honest, I died here way more than I'd like to admit on my first playthrough, as I didn't realise that we needed to distract the guy. I just assumed it would be yet another stealth section. Alone hits something, but this hit actually gives us a good moment in the chapter. The reveal that this giant snake-like thing is actually a foot is incredibly ominous. It gives us this vision of how massive this last enemy has to be, if this is just part of one leg. Though, sadly, after this reveal, we're back to nothingness for quite a long time. We run around a little until we find ourselves in the room where Lo's cutaways have taken place, and we get this time-distorting doll. Personally, I'm not a fan of this. It just feels way too gimmicky. It also reminds me of Joyville 2, where we have the rabbit plush that allows us to time travel. And admittedly, Joyville did this better, as the doll here really just feels like some gimmick tool, as it's only used twice throughout the chapter. I was really expecting it to be a tool that's needed for the majority of the remainder of the game, but no, we get this fuse, and then we just have to leave it behind for like a good amount of time. Personally, I think this doll should have been either the catalyst for a story cutscene, which it kinda was, I guess, or should have been the introduction to the little collectible dolls that we've collected a handful of throughout the game so far. Yes, the final chapter might have been a little late to give the player a mandatory collectible, but it would add replayability for more casual players who up to now have not found any of the collectibles. As it stands, it leaves Little Nightmare 3 feeling way more mascot horror adjacent than it should, as each chapter, aside from 2, seems to give us a gimmick tool to use. Chapter 1 has the umbrella, Chapter 3 has the flashlight, and Chapter 4 has the time travel plushie. And aside from the umbrella, they're not really utilised that much. We have a singular chase sequence that ends with, you guessed it, Alone hitting something. Another 20 or so minutes of nothing, aside from a singular plant that we use to kill a non-threat of an enemy, the second of the two doll uses, and Lo shooting something, we enter the final sequence of the game. Starts with another chase sequence, which leads us to a gong. Alone hits the gong, we have more running to do, and then it's finally time for the final fight. Admittedly, I did have some hope for this, but that quickly faded. The entire fight is in 3 steps. Avoid some poorly telegraphed debris, get to the gong once it appears, and then have both characters use their gimmick tools. Alone hits something, and then Lo shoots something. I will give the game a little credit, this ending cutscene is quite nice, and the music here is lovely, but the boss fight just left a sour taste in my mouth. And that was Little Nightmares 3! Just as I did with my last video, I'm gonna take some time now to talk through a few other things that I couldn't find a good place to fit. First, why is there no local co-op? It's such a missed opportunity. I would absolutely love to sit down on the sofa with my partner, cuddle up under a blanket, and play this game together. Playing horror games like that is a lot of fun. Second, throughout this video, you'll have noticed that I have said the lines, "Alone hits something," and "Low shoots something," a lot. And there's a reason for that. Alone and Low having the wrench and bow respectively is a very cool concept, however that's all. In practice, it actually takes away from the game quite a bit, as by having the characters hold the solution to pretty much all of the game's barriers, it reduces the need for the player to actually interact with the world. Take the start of the second game, for example. We grab fallen branches to trigger bear traps, and drag an axe twice the size of us to swing at the door to the room that Six is being kept in. And even in the first game, we use toy blocks or shoes or anything else in the environment to throw at buttons to open doors. Here, we simply carry the tools we need and never really need to explore to find items around us. I know that in my first playthrough, I was so used to everything being solved by one of these gimmick tools that a few times that wasn't the solution. I ended up spending quite a bit longer than I'd like to admit before my brain registered that maybe I'd actually need to use the world around me to progress. Another big complaint I have with the game is that the world almost feels like it was designed for us little people to move through compared to the previous installments. There's just far too many of these two-person vents around. There's moments where there's two in a row, or areas where every single room seems to have one of these vents connecting them. The world, compared to the previous games, also feels way too in scale with the size of our characters. There's so many moments in the previous games where the sheer size of things is overwhelming. From the first game, there's the shot from outside of the moor, and this moment where we push cages off, and there's a good 5-second delay before we can hear the cage smash against the floor. And the second game has multiple gigantic rooms, with ceilings we'd never see, or buildings so immense that they seem to warp towards us and tower over us. Little Nightmares 3 just feels like the world was a little too designed for people of Alone and Low's stature. And my final real complaint about the game is the lack of stylistic connection between the 4 chapters. Little Nightmares 1 was set entirely in the moor, this giant underwater vessel restaurant thing, where we slowly progressed between the different areas. We start in the prison, a child storage facility where the janitor keeps us in line, then the kitchen, where horrific chefs prepare food from the kids and other mystery meat. Third, we have the restaurant itself, where giants flock to eat us, and lastly, we end up in the ladies' quarters and face against the overseer of it all. Little Nightmares 2, aside from Chapter 1, takes place in this ruined dystopia. Chapter 1 makes sense to be outside of it, as it reintroduces us to the mechanics of the game, and to Six, who isn't actually revealed to be Six at this point. We face off against the Hunter before blasting him with his own shotgun in an impressive display of improvised teamwork. Chapters 2 and 3 flow beautifully, with the small parts that we get to explore of the city between the school and the hospital feeling incredibly natural. Chapter 4 takes that one step further and turns the city environment into the level itself, which I think is a very neat concept and works phenomenally well in practice. And lastly, Chapter 5 takes us to the Signal Tower, a building that had been looming ominously in the background for the whole time. Beautiful foreshadowing. Little Nightmares 3, however, the levels just feel disconnected. We go from the ruins of a vast city in the desert to a candy factory. I suppose there's a slight link between chapters 2 and 3, as we do see some of the candy in the carnival. But we do still teleport to this carnival through one of the plot-convenient mirrors. We exit chapter 3 through a hot air balloon, which crashes, and we find ourselves in the manor where Low's cutaways have been. The reveal to this building being the same place as those cutaways is interesting at least, but at the same time, we all saw it coming. There's also not a specific theme throughout Little Nightmares 3 that I can identify. whereas Little Nightmares 1 had the overarching theme of hunger, and Little Nightmares 2 had the theme of escapism. This game just feels like random ideas loosely connected together, as opposed to a fully fledged out world. Okay, this video has been a lot more negative than I thought it would be, which is not really something that I like to do. I will admit, as much as I've constantly ragged on this game, I didn't dislike playing it. Just the 2 games that came before it are so much better. While I would recommend it to people that enjoyed the previous installments, as it carries a £35 price tag, I would wait for it to go on sale before getting it. Little Nightmares 3, however, is a fantastic game concept with some ideas that, in theory, work really well. In practice, however, it's average at best. I feel like the loss of Tarsier absolutely didn't help. And for those wanting a new Little Nightmares-esque game with the same quality as the first 2, I'd recommend Reanimal, Tarsier's new project. The full game isn't out yet, but the demo is. In the description, I've left links to both Little Nightmares 3 and Reanimal's Steam pages, so you can check those out if you want to. And of course, if you did enjoy the incessant ramblings of a fox on the internet, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to see any future videos from me. Alongside that, I also stream over on Twitch, so consider dropping a follow over there too. I'm hoping to hit 350 by the end of the year. That's all from me. I have been Foxy, thank you, and good night.